In 2014, an anonymous data archivist uploaded a decrypted animation file to a deep web forum. His forum reputation score tripled that night.
Not because of the nostalgic cartoon, but because of what the comment section noticed hidden in the background frames.
The master file was 4 minutes and 12 seconds long. Detectives later timestamped the archivist's disappearance to within 3 minutes of the upload. That was the first tape.
Story 1. The deep web is heavily populated by digital scavengers, people who buy and trade stolen corporate data, classified documents, and lost media.
In the winter of 2016, a user going by the handle Cypher purchased a 3-terabyte hard drive from an anonymous seller. The listing simply read, "Rejected Broadcast Masters, 1997. Cypher assumed he had bought a collection of unaired pilots for a popular children's network. He loaded the first file at exactly 2 a.m. The video player opened.
The episode appeared normal at first. It featured a brightly colored animated dog walking down a cheerful suburban street. The background music was a simple, looping xylophone track.
But Cypher quickly noticed an unsettling detail. Every single background character in the cartoon, the pedestrians, the children, the mailman, were standing perfectly still, facing away from the camera, staring blankly at brick walls. At the 3-minute mark, the cheerful xylophone music violently pitched down, warping into a slow, heavy, metallic drone. The animated dog stopped walking. The dog didn't just stop. It slowly rotated its head to look directly out of the screen, and its large, cartoonish eyes had been completely replaced by hyper-realistic, bloodshot human eyes. Cypher recoiled in his chair. The animation style was impossible for 1997. It was too fluid, too organic. He tried to pause the video, but his mouse cursor was completely frozen.
The video continued to play. The dog slowly raised a single, white-gloved hand and pointed directly down at the bottom left corner of the animation frame.
Cypher leaned in, squinting at the screen. Etched into the digital pavement of the cartoon, written in tiny, barely legible red text, was a string of highly specific GPS coordinates.
He quickly typed the coordinates into a satellite mapping program. It pinpointed a dense, heavily wooded, isolated clearing deep in the Pacific Northwest.
When he looked back at the video player, the dog was gone. But the background characters, the ones who had been staring at the walls, were slowly beginning to turn around.
As they faced the camera, Cypher realized why they had been hiding their faces. They had no features, just smooth, pale, stretched skin where their eyes and mouths should be. The audio track clipped out into a deafening, agonizing, high-frequency squeal. A jagged white text overlay violently flashed across the screen. "We know you found it. Do not look out the window." Cypher's blood ran completely cold. He lived in a basement apartment. The only window was a narrow pane of glass located at street level, directly above his desk. He slowly looked up. Standing on the pavement outside, inches from the glass, was a pair of heavy black work boots. Whoever it was, they were standing perfectly still in the dead of night, facing his window. Before Cypher could move, his computer monitor violently short-circuited, plunging the room into suffocating blackness. And then, a slow, deliberate tapping began against the outside of the glass. Cypher destroyed his hard drives that night and fled the state. The original forum post was scrubbed entirely.
Story 2. In the early days of hand-drawn animation, hundreds of thousands of individual celluloid frames were required to create a single episode.
It was incredibly tedious work. Exhausted animators would occasionally sneak hidden messages or inside jokes into a single frame, knowing it would flash by the viewer's eyes in a fraction of a second. But in 2003, an independent archivist named Sarah was hired to digitally restore a classic 1930s black and white cartoon for a modern DVD release. The digital timestamp on Sarah's computer reads 3:14 a.m. The cartoon was a standard, cheerful rubber hose animation.
Sarah was scanning the original celluloid frames into her computer one by one, a process that required absolute, focused silence.
At exactly 3:14 a.m., she initiated the digital scan for frame 1402.
As the digital image slowly rendered on her high-definition monitor, Sarah noticed a severe anomaly in the ink. The background of the cartoon was completely warped. She zoomed in by 400%. The cheerful cat and mouse were entirely missing from this specific frame. Instead, the ink had been manipulated to form something highly realistic.
The heavy black ink hadn't been drawn in a cartoon style. It was a photorealistic, perfectly shaded depiction of a long, sterile, empty hospital hallway.
Confused, Sarah quickly placed the next cell onto the scanner. When the image rendered, a towering, dark silhouette was now standing at the very end of the drawn hallway.
Her hands began to tremble. Someone had hidden an entirely different, terrifying narrative inside the cartoon. She compiled the hidden frames and played them back. The silent black and white animation was horrifying. The towering silhouette in the hospital hallway was sprinting rapidly, violently toward the camera lens.
The animation abruptly stopped on the final frame. The entity's face completely filled the monitor. But it wasn't a cartoon monster. It was a perfect, hyper-realistic, hand-drawn portrait of Sarah's own face, frozen in an expression of absolute, paralyzing agony.
The ambient hum of the scanner died instantly. The room was plunged into an oppressive, suffocating silence. And then the heavy wooden door to Sarah's private studio slowly clicked open behind her. She slowly spun her chair around. Reaching around the dark crack of the doorframe was a single, impossibly pale hand wearing a classic white cartoon glove. But the fabric was stained with thick, dark, wet blood.
A low, heavily distorted, pre-recorded laugh echoed from the pitch-black hallway.
Sarah didn't wait to see the face connected to the arm. She dove through the ground floor window and ran. The original celluloid reels were missing when police investigated the next morning. Story 3. Broadcast signal intrusions are highly illegal. They are incredibly difficult to execute. They are almost always the work of sophisticated hackers trying to make a political statement. But in 2008, a regional cable provider in the Midwest experienced an intrusion during a late-night cartoon marathon that defied all technical explanation. A father named Mark had fallen asleep on the couch while his young son watched television in the bedroom down the hall. At exactly 3:33 a.m., the audio of the cheerful animated bear began to violently warp. The sickening metallic frequency woke Mark up. The sound wasn't normal static. It was a heavy, pulsating drone. He sat up in the dark and looked down the hallway. The cheerful background music dropped out entirely. The television speakers went dead silent for exactly 4 seconds. And then a voice began broadcasting through the house. It was a deep, synthetic, heavily layered voice. It didn't make a political statement. It didn't spout random numbers. It calmly, methodically said, "The man is sitting on the gray couch. The boy is sitting on the floor."
Mark's heart completely stopped. The broadcast was accurately describing the exact layout of his home in real time. He looked at his son, who was staring blankly at the screen, entirely mesmerized.
The synthetic voice spoke again. "The front door is unlocked." The colorful digital forest violently glitched. It was instantly replaced by a grainy black and white live video feed. It was a security camera angle. It was Mark's own front porch. Standing on his porch, staring directly into the outdoor security camera, was a towering, emaciated figure. It was wearing a massive, rotting, real-world mascot head of the exact same cartoon bear. The synthetic voice from the television vibrated the floorboards. It whispered, "I am opening the door now.
"Do not move." Mark didn't hesitate. He violently grabbed his son, hoisted him over his shoulder, and sprinted blindly toward the back door of the house. As his feet hit the kitchen linoleum, he heard the heavy deadbolt of the front door slowly click open.
He risked one look back over his shoulder. Cast against the wall by the blue light of the television was a massive, terrifying, elongated shadow stepping into his living room. Mark burst through the back door into the freezing night and called the police from a neighbor's house. By the time authorities arrived, the house was completely empty, but the television in the bedroom was still on. The cable company swore they had no record of a signal intrusion, but when police dusted the television screen, they found something that broke all logic. Under a forensic blacklight, the glass was covered in massive smeared human handprints, but they weren't on the outside of the monitor. The prints had been violently pressed against the inside of the glass. The entity on the broadcast wasn't hacking into the house from the outside. It was trying to break out of the television. Story 4. Before digital archives and the internet, lost media was purely physical. If a television network wanted an episode to disappear, they simply erased the master tapes. But they couldn't control the millions of home VHS recorders that were constantly rolling in living rooms across the country. In 1984, a local station aired an unlisted, unannounced episode of a popular children's show at 3 a.m. It was entirely documented. A college student who had left his VCR recording overnight accidentally captured the only known copy. Decades later, a digital media restorer named Evan purchased the unmarked tape at an estate sale. When he played it back in his dark studio, the episode started normally, a cheerful clown juggling blocks. But 2 minutes into the recording, the animation severely degraded. The bright circus tent background dissolved entirely, replaced by a suffocating, bruised purple void. The cheerful calliope music warped into a deafening, low-frequency metallic hum. The clown stopped juggling. It let the red blocks fall off the bottom of the screen. The animated figure slowly turned its body to face the camera. Its stitched, painted smile stretched unnaturally wide. Its cartoon eyes dissolved into hollow, dripping black voids. It didn't speak, it just stared. But the low-frequency hum on the audio track wasn't just noise. Evan realized it was a sub-aural frequency, vibrating at exactly 30 hertz. It is a frequency specifically weaponized by military psyops to induce severe physiological dread, paranoia, and nausea in the human brain. Evan felt his chest tighten. He reached to turn the volume dial down. But on the screen, the clown slowly raised its pale hand. It pressed its palm directly against the inside of the glass. The hum instantly died. The tape went perfectly silent. And then, a sharp, physical tapping sound echoed in the room. Evan ripped his headphones off. The tapping continued. He looked down at his audio interface. The speakers were completely unplugged. The sound wasn't coming from the audio track. Evan stared at his heavy CRT monitor. The thick glass of the screen was physically vibrating. The animated clown tapped the glass again. A microscopic hairline fracture suddenly spidered across Evan's physical monitor. The cartoon wasn't a recording. It was a live transmission, perfectly preserved on magnetic tape for 30 years, and it was tired of waiting. The most terrifying conspiracies aren't about hidden messages or subliminal audio. They are about the things the animation studios locked inside their hard drives, hoping they would eventually delete themselves. The deafening crack of thick glass. Instant cut to the heavy, sterile hum of a massive server farm. Story 5. In the late 1990s, the animation industry transitioned heavily from physical hand-drawn celluloid to digital rendering. The corporate narrative was that this saved time and money. But a heavily classified rumor circulating on the dark web suggested a much darker reason. The studios didn't switch to digital tools to draw characters. They switched to digital tools to contain them.
In 2021, a freelance data recovery specialist named Thomas was paid heavily in cryptocurrency to decrypt a stolen server rack from a bankrupt animation studio. After 3 weeks of grinding through military-grade encryption, he isolated a single, massive video file. The file was incredibly dense, nearly 500 gigabytes for a single MP4. Thomas double-clicked the icon. The video player launched, filling his dark office with a blinding, pure white glow. Standing in the exact center of the pure white void on the screen was a brightly colored, highly stylized, two-dimensional cartoon rabbit. It was a character Thomas immediately recognized from his own childhood. The character wasn't speaking or interacting. It was simply existing in an idle state. It blinked its massive cartoon eyes every 3 seconds. It shifted its weight every 12 seconds. The animation loop was utterly flawless, but the video's total runtime was exactly 10 hours long. Thomas assumed it was a master render file left running by mistake. Seeking the end of the footage, he grabbed his mouse and accelerated the video playback to 16 times normal speed. The digital timestamp raced forward, 1 hour, 2 hours, but exactly at the 3-hour and 33-minute mark, the video player violently stuttered. The software overrode Thomas's command, dropping the playback down to normal speed entirely on its own. Thomas leaned closer to the glass. The flawless animation loop had broken. The rabbit was no longer shifting its weight. Its painted, cheerful smile had slowly, seamlessly faded into a flat, rigid line. The character slowly rotated its head. It wasn't looking out at the viewer. It was looking around the pure white void of the video frame. It walked to the far left edge of the screen and placed its cartoon hands flat against the invisible digital boundary. It began to beat its fists against the edge of the frame. The video had no audio track, but the visual violence was deeply disturbing. The animation was no longer operating at the standard 24 frames per second. It was moving with an impossibly fluid, hyper-realistic, sickening momentum. Thomas felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He reached for his mouse to close the application, but his digital cursor had vanished from the screen completely. The file had locked his operating system. On the screen, the rabbit stopped hitting the boundary. It turned, sprinting frantically to the exact center of the white void. It collapsed to its knees. Its massive cartoon eyes were wide with genuine human terror. It looked directly into the camera lens and began to mouth words frantically. There was no audio. Desperate to understand what he was documenting, Thomas routed the video feed into a highly specialized algorithmic lip-reading software on his secondary monitor. The AI analyzed the geometry of the character's mouth and began generating a live transcript in green text. Thomas stared at the secondary monitor as the terrifying sentences assembled themselves. Please do not look away. Do not close the window. They turn off the lights when you look away. Thomas's breathing grew shallow. He looked back at the primary monitor. The pure white void of the video file was beginning to decay. The 4 corners of the screen were slowly darkening into a sickly, bruised gray. A massive, elongated shadow was bleeding into the digital space. The cartoon rabbit scrambled backward in absolute panic, pressing its animated hands directly against the inside of the monitor glass, trying to push itself out of the screen. The lip-reading software flashed violently with a new translation. The text read, "It is in the cage with me. It has always been in the cage with me." A massive, hyper-realistic, pitch-black shadow violently engulfed the center of the frame. The cartoon rabbit's silent screams were cut short as it was ripped backward into the digital darkness, vanishing completely. The video player was now completely black. Thomas sat frozen in his chair, staring into the dark void of his monitor. The ambient hum of his computer tower died. The silence in the office was absolute and crushing. Slowly, the massive shadow in the video file began to move again. It hadn't left the digital cage. It was stepping forward out of the darkness, moving closer and closer to the glass of the screen.
As it approached the foreground, the shape of the shadow resolved. It wasn't an animated monster. It was a silhouette. And it perfectly, flawlessly, matched the exact shape of Thomas sitting in his chair, wearing his heavy studio headphones.
Thomas's blood turned to ice. He slowly raised his trembling right hand. On the screen, the dark silhouette perfectly mirrored the movement. It wasn't a pre-rendered video file. It was a live reflection.
The horrifying realization hit him all at once. The massive entity wasn't inside the video file dragging the cartoon into the dark. The entity was standing in the physical room with him, directly behind his chair, casting its shadow into the dark monitor.
The animation studios didn't switch to digital tools to draw characters. They switched to digital tools to build cages, and some files are locked for a reason.
A single, deafening pulse of a low-frequency sub-bass rumble, cut instantly to dead silence. The night is long, and the shift is only beginning. Subscribe before the clock strikes 3. A faint, distorted, barely audible whisper in the right audio channel only. Total fade out.